All right, so Michael Price, you just said you just got finished working here on The Simpsons. What was the day like today at the Simpsons studio? Do you go to the studio anymore, or
Oh,
is it just Simpsons Studio is your house now?
no, no, no. We're in the studio. We're back in our writer's room,
Oh,
working
great.
together. We've been there since full time since the beginning of last year, last February, and then we took a couple months off because we were on strike last year. But once the strike ended, then we came back. So we're all together inside the writer's room again.
Because I know during COVID, obviously, there was a lot of virtual rooms.
Of
You must
course.
have just been hammering to just get back into the right with the room of each other, right? Because the energy, you just can't compare the energy when you're doing it over Zoom compared to in. Because when we're doing our podcast during COVID, we do it over Zoom. You just can't embrace that same energy, can you?
No, it was different. I mean, we were able to get, thank goodness, we were able to get the work done, and we came up with a lot of great episodes, and the whole show was produced virtually, by remote,
Yeah.
with the actors recording their parts from their homes, and the animators working from home, and the writers' room. We made it work, but it was great to come back. We were all so excited to come back.
What was it like when you first got back to the studio together? Was it just a one big embrace?
Almost, almost. Yeah, it was great. It was great. We kept in touch, through Zoom, of course. But then during the course of the pandemic, uh, as as things started to get a little better, we had a couple of outings where we met at, like, we had a meeting, a group meeting, like at the outside in one of the backyards of one of our homes and things like
Oh
that. So we're
wow,
able to sort
that's
of stay
great.
together. Yeah, there were some people who were hired. One writer who was hired onto the show in the middle of the pandemic, so we had never met her, and her name is Lonnie Steele Sostin. We had never met her in person, so at one of these backyard things, we finally met her in person. So
That's got
uh,
to be intimidating, right? Joining the Simpsons staff, but not actually meeting them until after you've started.
yeah, I think so. It's intimidating anyway. I mean, it was for me, when I started all those years ago. But yeah,
Late 2001 for you, wasn't it?
that's
December
correct.
2001.
Yes, Stuart Burns and I
Yeah.
both started the same day. It was something like December 19th or something of 2001. I tell the story a lot, but uh, we had one day, it was a Friday, I think, and uh, and then they were like, "Okay, that's it. We're off for 2 weeks for Christmas vacation." And I was like, "This is a pretty good job."
Because you came into the show post what people referred to as like the golden era, and I believe during that time it was late hours, all nighters. It wasn't that case by the time you started, right? I think was it Mike Scully that brought in the 9 to 5 kind of
Yes,
mentality? Yeah,
I believe that's true. I mean, I don't think that. I think I've worked on a lot of different shows, and I've had my own shows that I've run,
yeah.
uh, and it
Episode
doesn't
Family,
have.
huge
Yes.
success.
Oh, thank you. It doesn't have to be that way. I think often. I mean, I wasn't around here for the early years of the show, so I don't know like what the dynamic was, but it doesn't have to be that way. Like there's no correlation often between like working all night or working till 3 o'clock in the morning and quality. I mean, it turned out that those early years of this show are fantastic and great and legendary, but I think that you can make great stuff and not have to drive everybody to the point of exhaustion either.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah. So we have a pretty good work day. We work usually from around 10:30 in the morning till around 5:30 or 6 at night.
That's a good
Um,
work day.
yeah,
10:30. That's a good sleep. That's a good sleep in.
it's
But you
good.
probably need it for the LA traffic, right?
That's true. That's true.
What was your relationship like with The Simpsons before you started? Were you a fan of the show? I mean, and obviously, you can say you were a fan. Everyone was a fan, but did you watch the show, or what was your relationship like with the show?
Yeah, well, I would say that when it first started, I hadn't yet begun my doing. I was interested in. I was an actor. I was doing theater, and I was doing comedy performance, like improv and sketch comedy stuff in a little comedy group in New York City. So we were all comedy nerds, and so when the show started, well, first it was part of the Tracy Ullman show, so a lot of us were aware of that, and I knew about Matt Groening's work a little bit because I had seen some of his cartoons, in Life and Hell cartoons. Um, and then when the show itself started in 1990, that's when I was really in the middle of all that with working with young people, and we're all excited about comedy. And somebody said, "Oh my God, The Simpsons is so great! It's so incredible, right out of the box." We all watched it all the time, and I have a really great memory of us all being at an outdoor outing kind of thing in New York City. It was for Earth Day,
Yeah.
where they had a huge concert in Central Park with um, the B-52s and a bunch of people playing, and we all got hot and sweaty, and we all went back to someone's house and said, "Oh, the Simpsons are coming on," and we all watched it together, and we're all remarking about how funny it was and how great it was. So yeah, so I was certainly aware of it. It was a huge phenomenon. Living in New York City at the time, so that's when suddenly everywhere you looked, there were the T-shirts on for sale. These bootleg T-shirts for sale on the sidewalk of every kind of version of Bart, the black version of Bart, like the Rasta version of Bart. All those were everywhere. It was so fun to see. Um, and then around that time was when I started really taking comedy writing and trying to make a career of it seriously. So I stayed aware of the show. I watched it whenever I could. I wouldn't say I watched every single week because back in those days, like you couldn't
Yeah.
it was on Sunday night, and if you missed it, maybe you got a rerun. Um, so by the time I got on the show, about 12 years into the show, 13 years into the show, I certainly knew about it. It was on all the time. Reruns were on all the time, and I'd worked with people who had worked on it. I had worked on I'd worked with Al Jean and Mike Reese on a couple of shows, and then but right before I got on The Simpsons, one of the last shows I worked on was called The PJs, which was a animated show with
Yeah.
starring Eddie Murphy, and the showrunner on that was Larry Wilmore and Steve Tompkins, who had worked on the show during the Bill and Josh years, like season 7 or season 8. So anyway, I was certainly aware of it, and we talked about it a lot, and sometimes episodes would come on and we'd watch them together, but there was a lot of episodes that I hadn't seen. So when I started on the show, I knew I had about 2 months or so where I knew I was getting ready. I had the job, but we weren't starting yet. So I used that time to just watch it every night, and I had a VCR, so I would record the shows and whatever, and
What a
try to
time to be
catch.
alive, right?
Yeah,
Taping it,
yeah,
cutting out the commercials.
that's right, that's right. So I watched as many as I could, and there weren't even any books or anything yet. I think there were a couple of those little tiny guidebooks that come out, but it was mostly just watch as many episodes as I could, which I did. But even when I started, there was a vast knowledge of the show that I didn't have, and I had to do some catching up. And I remember one of those first days, we were working on the episode that's called Barding Over, which
Hmm.
is turned out to be episode 300, the one where Bart sues
Tony
Homer
Hawk.
for a man, Tony
Yeah,
Hawk
yeah.
and all that. So they were working on the episode, working on the scene where there's a trial, and they were talking about, the writers were all talking about like who should the lawyers be, and so someone said Gil, and I just kind of sat there like I had no idea who they were talking about.
Oh,
I didn't
really?
know who Gil was. No, because I had missed that episode. I mean, I think he
Yeah.
had been around a long time by then. But now he's one of my favorite characters. But they're like, "Oh, what if it was Gil?" And they're like, "Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good." And I just sort of just
Nodded along.
shut up and nodded along. But then
Smile and wave.
that's right. But then I did open my big mouth and made a huge mistake, which was one of the writers said, "We need lawyers." Like I think Gil ended up being Homer's lawyer, I think, and then Bart ended up hiring this other lawyer to
Was it the
be
blue
his.
head lawyer or something?
Well,
Maybe
the blue-haired lawyer, no, but
he's usually
maybe
the
the
rich guy one,
blue-haired
isn't he?
lawyer
Yeah.
worked for. Yeah, it was a weird thing, but somebody pitched him. Somebody
Yeah.
pitched him, but see what we call him in the show. Everyone calls him blue-haired lawyer, but in the scripts and everything, he's called Burns's lawyer
Okay.
because way back when he was first introduced to the show, he was worked for Mr. Burns, and he would
Yeah.
occasionally show up and like work for Mr. Burns and have Homer sign like a waiver saying, you are now, like that. But then he just became like all-purpose annoying lawyer. So I didn't know this. So one of the writers pitched like, what if it was Burns's lawyer? And they go, oh, that's good. And I go, well, I don't know, why would Burns's lawyer work for Bart, or why would Burns's lawyer work for Homer? He works for Mr. Burns. And Ian Maxtone Graham, who was running that room, he looked at me very patiently, but also with a little bit of like, he goes, we just call him Burns's lawyer, like that. And I like, oh man, I am such an idiot. So, so
I'll
luckily
see myself out.
that's right. So luckily I had that 2 weeks of Christmas vacation to sort of like remind myself, don't say anything stupid, and learn more about the show. And even though it's Christmas vacation, watch as many episodes as you can
Do you
to
think you've
learn who
seen every
these
episode
people are.
now? Do you think you've seen them
I
all?
think I was talking about this with someone the other day, because one of our newer writers, who's young, her name is Brothi Gupta. She just joined the show a couple of years ago, she is younger than the show. So I think she's around 30, maybe 30 years old or so. So,
Wow.
the
Lucky
show's
her.
older than her. So, yeah. So she just recently, I mean, she said it on her, she said about making her request to watch every episode, so she started at the beginning and just went through and watched, and she just finished, and she's now caught up. So we were talking about that, and I think there might be a one or two that maybe I still haven't seen all the way through. But I
Classic
think for
ones
the
though. You would
most
have seen
part,
them all, right? Classic
yeah,
ones.
yeah, certainly. But there's a few there probably. If I go through the episode list, I may find one or two that I maybe haven't seen all the way through or don't quite remember.
Can you rewatch the ones that you wrote, or do you sit there just nitpicking them all the time?
Well, yes and yes. So I watch them. I do watch them, and it's funny. I will nitpick sometimes. I will say, "Oh, this that joke could have been better," or whatever. But often, what happens is I'll watch them, and I'll be put back in the space of the memory of the writing of it, or like what I was doing at the time, that time in my life, or what was going on, like why
Yeah.
this joke became that. So that's often what I think about when I watch those old shows. It's hard for me to just watch them as just a show. It's easier for me to do that with everybody else's shows, like from seasons I worked on. But if it's one that I wrote, then I'm often thinking about like, oh, how did this idea come about, or what was I doing then, or what was going on, or like
How
that.
long do you give yourself before you go, the joke's fine, move on to the next one? How long do you sort of just focus on one gag and go, it can be better, it can be better. You haven't got enough time, you just got to move on.
Well, usually it helps to have a deadline of some kind. So like when I'm off, when you get sent off to write a script, you usually get 2 weeks to go away and just go off and work from
Yeah.
home or go to a coffee shop or whatever and write it. So I guess if I didn't have a deadline, maybe I would still be tinkering with stuff because it's often it's hard to let go or it's hard to like, oh, and sometimes what I'll find is I'll hand it in and then I'll look at it like a day later and realize some mistake I made or I
Yeah.
could have done better on that.
But they'll fix it anyway. 'Cause it's what,
Yeah, I mean,
80% different by the time it goes there anyway. So
absolutely. Yeah, then it,
yeah.
then it gets handed over to the whole room, and the whole staff works on it and makes it way better.
Describe that 2 weeks. So you get assigned the episode, you got 2 weeks to write it. Do you go and
Yeah,
write it straight away? Or like you said, you go to a coffee shop, you relax, do you ponder it? Do you wait till the last second before you start writing it? What's that 2 weeks like?
yeah. Well, actually, it turns out to be a kind of a combination of several weeks because the first thing that happens is the first thing that happens is we come up with the idea for the thing, and then we spend a couple of days in the room with a smaller group and ultimately with our showrunner Matt Selman, like working out the beats of the story and just talking it through and sort of arriving at a basic structure. And then you get a week to go off to write an outline. So that then you turn into like a treatment, which is like a prose version of the show. And then we go through that again, and then you actually write the script. But yeah, to answer your question, like I tend to procrastinate a little bit. So like what I might do is like the first day or two, I don't do anything, or maybe what I'll tend to do is I'll take the outline and then I will then sort of convert it from the outline software is Microsoft Word, right? Which is like Word, like a prose, and then I'll import it into our screenwriting software, which is called Final Draft, and sort of I'll just format it so it looks like a script. And
Yeah.
sometimes we'll have like little sample lines in the outline. So I've already written like I feel like I've already written most of it, like it's there, So then I get to take a couple of days off or whatever, and then what I'll do, I'll pick it up again and I'll print the script out either physically in paper or I have a program on my iPad where I'm able to sort of look at it and make notes with the iPad pencil. And that's what I'll do. Then I'll sort of make notes about it and think of funny things. And again, I'm sort of just like, to me, it's like, this is the fun part where I get just to think of funny things and I don't have to worry about it. Just be crazy and write a bunch of funny stuff. And then after a couple of days of that, then I'll start in and like, okay, now I'm actually doing it. But I have those notes that I've made over the first couple of days to sort of turn it into something. And then
Do
I
you have
get
a...
scared. Then I always get
Go.
scared that like, this is going to be terrible. It's going to be too long or it's going to stink. I always get through that every time.
I was going to ask about anxiety with writing because I just, I'd love to write things, but there's always that moment where you just second guess yourself.
All the time. All the time.
Yeah.
I think if I didn't, I feel like that's it. that's time to hang it up. Like I always feel every time like this one's going to stink. This one's going to be terrible. I don't know how to do this.
What are your coping mechanisms for anxiety when it comes to moments like that?
Coping mechanism for anxiety. Boy, I don't know. I maybe go for a walk or something, or take my dog out for a walk, or just hang out
Yeah.
with my family or whatever, or just do anything else, watch a baseball game or something. And you think after all these years, I've written how many scripts, 20 so scripts for the show, that I feel like I got this. And I usually kind of hear that in the back of my mind, but in the front of my mind, it's always like, this is no good. This is the one that's going to be terrible.
Yeah. You mentioned Matt Salmon before. How reliant are you guys on the likes of Al Jean and Matt Salmon when it comes to, has this been done before, or just knowledge of the show? Because those guys are just institutions now, right?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, well, Al's been here since practically day one.
Yeah.
So he
He
joined
left for the Critic
in
for a couple of
season.
years, but yeah.
Yeah, but even then, when he and Mike were doing the Critic, they were still doing
Yeah.
things with the show. They never quite left the show full time. And Al has an amazing memory. Matt does too. Matt's been here a little bit less time than that, but still. And yeah, I mean, the other thing that's great is now, again, when I first started in 2001, 2002, we didn't have a whole lot. We had those little books, and the internet there was some stuff on the internet, but it wasn't like as much as it is now.
I've got them behind me, the complete guidebooks, you mean, yeah?
Yeah, now we have those giant books, but now there's
Yeah.
Wikipedia, like there's an article about everything. And then now the other thing is that every episode is now available to be seen on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
So if we're thinking, I think it was in that episode, blah, 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 then we can like Google whatever was in there, and it'll say like, oh, that was this season 7, episode 12, and then we go call it up on Disney Plus and watch it.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good.
Were there worries when Disney purchased, Fox and The Simpsons? Because for me, I just feel it's just been an absolute positive, because like you said, Disney Plus, I feel like a whole new audience has been able to discover the show as a result. It's because it's just so easily accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there were many worries, because the show had such a reputation. It built itself, and they, from what I can gather, I'm not at that highest level, but that they assured it was still a Fox network show. So Fox Network said, like, this is still the same show, and Disney, like, they've never told us to, like, don't do that joke or don't do this joke. To me, it doesn't seem like it's much different.
That's what I feel like the fear would have been, is Disney, Disney's Disney. They would have liked to sort of put their fingerprints on it, but that's not the case.
That's not the case as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they've been very helpful and very supportive, and and it helps that the show remains popular, on the network, but also on Disney Plus. I think it's one of the, if not the highest, one of the highest like streaming shows on there. So why mess with a good thing?
I think it's just helped for me as a podcaster and as a fan of the show to keep up with the show as well, because here in Australia, when it was on what you guys call cable, I guess, or just commercial television, whatever, it was sometimes airing at different times, different days. You couldn't keep up to date. Now I know, because viewing habits have changed now in 2024. I know every Wednesday in Australia, there's going to be new Simpsons. I'll get to it when I get to it. I know it's there. I know it's going to be there ready. So I think that's another plus as well, just being able to keep up to date with the show.
Yeah, it's amazing, how they're out there, and they, so even there's people here in the United States where it's on Fox, but then 2 days later it's on Hulu, which is the streaming site. But then when the whole season is over, then the whole season will then move on to Disney Plus. So I know there's people who are saying, I'll watch that when it gets on Disney Plus, or I'll watch that when it gets on Hulu. So
we just get
ways to watch.
We get them straight to Disney. We're 1 week, so you air them on the Sunday in the States. The following Wednesday, we've got them on Disney Plus, which is, it's never been that way, which is fantastic. Yeah.
That's incredible, because I know, like in the UK, it might be a month or two. Because there was a show that I wrote that was on earlier this year that was about Willie going back to Scotland and getting married in Scotland, and that aired in the United States in I believe in October, and then it didn't air in the UK or Scotland until like January or so.
No, we get it within a week now. It's fantastic.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, season 36 starts soon. Both Matts were actually at SDCC this week.
Yes.
And they announced that the premiere, Bart's Birthday, is going to have some guest stars.
Yes.
It's got, was it John Cena, Danny DeVito, Tom Hanks. Now, the first question is, please tell me Unky Hove is returning.
Well, I can say that Danny DeVito was playing a character that he played previously in the show.
Yes, we've been saying for years, please bring back Unky Herb.
uh, I can tell you that.
Yeah,
I can't tell you much more about it.
yeah,
I know that I heard that I saw a little bit of what Matt Selman said. It's kind of a big, crazy, big swing of an episode. Um, it does involve Bart's the story involves Bart's birthday, but that's just a small part of it, I would say. And
yeah.
these other characters show up for various reasons that we're going to keep it kind
Yeah.
of under wraps until the premiere. But it's very
There's some
exciting.
serious. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
There's some serious A-listers to all put into one episode.
yeah, yeah, yes, yes, that's true. Tom Hanks, uh, Danny DeVito, John
John
Cena.
Cena.
I don't think they mentioned him, but Joel McHale is in this episode as well,
Wow.
and some baseball players, and Conan O'Brien. Conan O'Brien playing himself. It's going to be very fun, very exciting episode. It's written by Jess Conrad, who's a great within us within the last couple of years. She's written a lot of amazing episodes, and we have a newer system here on the show where I'm one of the co-runners, meaning that Matt is our main showrunner, but
Top dog. Yeah.
myself, Rob Lezebnik, Tim Long, and Brian Kelly are the co-runners. So we have a certain amount of episodes that we are responsible for sort of supervising, and this is one of mine. So I'm very, very excited about it.
That is very, very cool. Yeah. So can we expect more guest stars, or are we just gonna blow them all on the first episode?
No, there's more. There's more. I can't think of any off the bat. Yeah, there's certainly some more. Oh, Andy Serkis is going to be returning to the show. He
Wow.
was on the show a couple years ago doing Gollum. I think some other
Yeah.
things. He's playing a new character. We have our second. We have our main Halloween show called Trios of Horror, and then as we did before a couple years ago, we had a second kind of horror themed Halloween show, which was that one based on Stephen King's It.
Yeah.
So this one now is based on the stories of Ray Bradbury. So it's called Simpsons Wicked This Way Comes. So it's a little bit of, and Andy Serkis is playing kind of our version of the Illustrated Man, who helps introduce these tales that are based on famous Ray Bradbury stories. And that's a really great one. And Jessica Conrad wrote that one as well. So it's very, very exciting. A lot of great shows.
One of my favorite episodes of the last decade is Halloween of Horror, the canon Halloween episode.
Yes.
Do you think you'll ever do canon Halloween ones again? Because I thought that episode was just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it was great. I don't know if we'll do a canon Halloween show again. Maybe if we can, a great idea, only because that one covered it all and was so amazing, so we tend not to try to duplicate or do something we've done in the past. But you never know. That was Carolyn Amine wrote that episode. That's such a great, amazing episode too.
I've always said you could put that in season 6, 7, or whatever, and wouldn't feel out of place. It was just so great.
Yeah, it's a really, really great episode.
So you got so many guests in the premiere. Is there sort of do you feel like there's a need to have to start with a bang each season?
Well, yeah, it's fun to sort of start the season off with something fun and exciting. And without, I can't get into spoiling more about this episode. This one makes sense to be the premiere, and it makes sense to be kind of big in that way, kind of a wider scope of an episode. It'll all make sense after you see it.
In one month.
Yeah, it's certainly, it's going to air in the United States, I think, in September, at the end of September. I mean, it's fun because we're starting the season, so you want the first episode of the season to be something exciting and something fun that people will want to tune in for. And this one just happened to work out that way.
How'd the Conan O'Brien aspect come into it? Did he contact you? Did you contact him?
We contacted him, so we had this idea to use him in this episode, and we asked him, and he happily said yes and came by and recorded with us. And
he came in. Wow, that's great. What was it like having Conan back? What was it like?
It was great. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was great. I mean, he's so funny. He's so great. And we kind of caught him. We didn't know this when we recorded him back in January or so, I guess. He was sort of at the beginning of a lot of cool stuff was going on with him with his podcast and his show where he travels the world, and so we kind of caught him in the middle of like this kind of another upswing for him. He was great. He was fantastic.
What were you expecting from Conan? And did he surprise you in any way?
Not really. No, we were expecting him to be really as funny as he always is,
Yeah.
and he was. And he was really. I mean, he was really pleased and really happy to be back here. He came to the studio and recorded in a recording studio, and then he came and visited us all in the writers' room. And we have, in our writers' room, we have this wall covered with these posters for the show that were actually these posters were issued back in 2008 or so when they made these United States postage stamps of The Simpsons. So the posters all have the characters' faces on them, but we started using them around that time, around 2010 or so. Whenever anyone celebrity came to be on the show or to visit, we asked them to sign this wall. So we have now like 5 or 6 of these posters that are filled with like people's signatures, and so we had Conan, sign the wall, and it was great. He was happy to be back. He had a lot of great memories from working on the show, and yeah, and he's friendly with he's friends with some like Rob Lazebnik, knew him from school. A lot of the writers like knew him going back to like college and everything. So
Yeah. You mentioned the Treehouse of Horror. I think Denim was the one they revealed at SDCC with the gems.
Yes.
Do you tend to enjoy those ones more so than others, the Halloween ones, because they're just so fun, right?
Yeah, they're super fun. I've always loved those. Even when I was just a casual fan, I remember those were the ones I never missed. Like when it was Halloween time, I always made sure I watched the Simpsons Halloween episode, Treehouse of Horror. So they're really super fun to work on. I will be like producing co-running the one that will be on a year from next year. So we haven't even started that one yet, but we've started to come up with some ideas for it and getting some ideas, but we really have anything super set yet. But we'll start writing that soon and put that into production. And that will be then the Halloween show that will be
in a year's time.
Halloween of 25.
Is the Treehouse of Horror, is that sort of what every writer in the writer's room wants to be a part of? Is that the one they want to get their idea for that? Because having your idea for a Treehouse of Horror segment must be sort of like one of the top tier things as in the writer's room, right?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's really fun. They're fun to do. They're different. They're crazy, and then, I mean, this is going to seem like the most, whatever you want to call it, not insignificant, but whatever little thing is that they always put out a big poster every year,
Oh, they do. Yeah. It's very cool.
And the poster lists the names of the writers on it,
Ah.
So for me, I'm going to make sure I write one of the segments, I guess, but it'll be fun to have my name on a poster like that that I can then put up in my house or whatever. Like it's fun that they really still go all out and make a big presentation for the Treehouse and send out. They usually for TV critics here in the U.S. they send out like a box full of like candy with a DVD of the episode and everything. It's still kind of an event, which is fun. It's but really fun to be part of, and I'm looking forward to being have more of a hand in the one for next year.
Can you remember the first time you saw your name on the TV scene written by Michael Price?
Oh, absolutely. For Simpsons, certainly. For everything, for the first thing. Yeah. The first time I ever got one of those was for an animated show called Real Monsters.
Real Monsters. Yeah, I thought it was. Yeah. I loved that show as a kid.
Oh, great. Yeah, that was fun. I was so happy to do that, and I enjoyed that a great deal. Yeah, so I'll never forget that. Like, it's a huge moment in my life. And then for the first time I had sit on The Simpsons, that was even, like, to me, that was like,
gather around, children.
Yeah.
Yes. So, as I was saying earlier, you came onto the show post Golden Era. Are there many people left besides you, Matt, and Al, really, in the writers' room?
Sure. Oh, certainly. Yeah. When I there's so many people here who were still there when I started. Tim Long, Brian Kelly, Carolyn.
Is Ian still there?
Who?
Ian Maxstone Graham?
Ian, no. Ian, a few years ago went on to other great things. He was a writer on the show Veep. The great show Veep, among other things. No, like Dan Graney, Joel Cohen, Tim Long, like I said, Matt Selman, uh, and several of us all started around the same time, like Stuart Burns, Jeff Westbrook. I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, there are a lot of people who've been there longer than me, and a lot who've been around the same time, joined in around the same time as me. So
You mentioned a few of the newer writers just before.
yeah,
What are the questions they tend to ask you the most often when they're looking just for advice and things like that?
I don't think they really tend to ask me or us for advice, but they sometimes will have to say,
Who's Gil?
"Well, no, I think they learn who Gil is, but it might be a thing like, oh, it might be a thing where they go like, oh, well, we're thinking of doing this. This is an idea I have for a show, and someone like me might say like, well, actually, yeah, we did kind of a thing like that back in season 18 or whatever,
Oh,
like
you get
that.
a comic book guy on them. Well, actually, we did it in season 12.
Yeah, no. But they're all great. I mean, they're all incredible people. They're all super talented. Like, I'd say the people that we've joined in the last 5 or 6 years, uh, like in the last 10 years, we've added like Ryan Coe, Dan Weber, super hilarious. Um, and then after that, like in the last 6 or 7 years, uh, Cesar Masariegos, who wrote
Yeah.
the It thing. He also wrote the Flanders
Yeah.
two-parter,
Yep.
Serious
Serious
Flanders.
Flanders. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic show. Great writers: Christine Nangle, Jess Conrad, Brothy Gupta, Lonnie Steele, Sahastand, Jess Conrad. Like I said, just they're all fantastic and wonderful people, and they're all so smart, and they're a pleasure to work with.
Do you find the younger ones, younger writers who didn't necessarily grow up on the golden era when it was first on, do you feel like they bring a fresh approach to the show because they're not trying to sort of rely on that golden era sort of style?
Yeah, I'd say so. That's true. I mean, they also bring a fresh approach of their everyone. That's what's great about it. Like everyone brings their own experience, their own life experience, or the kind of work they've done previously, or the kind of other things they've done. Um, and I give full credit to Matt Selman for really, adding different voices to the staff, that enabled us to sort of reach out and tell different kinds of stories. So Lonnie, has a really interesting, family story. She comes from a mixed race family, half white, half black, and she has her husband is a cool guy who's a stuntman, but also like a rider, a horse rider guy, and so somewhat based on his past is the story that she wrote about Carl, learning that his roots go back to like the rodeo and all that, so that's based on her. But she also wrote an amazing story about Lisa befriending the son of Bleeding Gums Murphy, who's deaf.
Yeah,
And
that was
that's
the deaf
because
one.
that's right. It's because Lonnie
Yeah.
has a deaf relative, so she was able to draw on that, and
My wife loved that because she works, so she manages the office who books the interpreters for the news and whatnot here in Australia.
ah,
And when she heard that they were doing that, she thought that's so inclusive, and it's so lovely to see that.
yeah, it was lovely to do, and she did a great job with it, uh, and so we're all, yeah, everyone's coming in with different, fresh perspectives, and it's fun. It's fun to sort of like, and the show has been around for 35, 36 years now, and done almost 800 episodes. So we need that
Yeah.
fresh perspectives to keep the show fresh and keep it new, and that's part of what I think that what's made Matt so great as a showrunner is that he really encourages us to find unique stories based on what's going on in our own lives, and to take big creative swings, that have been really fun to do. So, like we did the great show that Brian Kelly wrote, that was the one that was on earlier this year, where it was like juxtaposing the modern story of Marge trying to get Bart tickets to this, you know, Spanish rap concert, with the story of like primal kind of story of caveman times
Yeah.
Marge, and it's so fun to do though, and challenging to do, and shows that break the form, that
There's so many
play
more
with
of
the
those now,
show.
and I love that
Yeah,
because they're more enjoyable for me. Because by season 36 now, or season 35, we've
Yeah.
seen pretty much everything we could possibly see, right?
Right.
Give us something fresh and different. I like, people complain about continuity. 35
No.
years,
Yeah.
you can bend that a bit. And that's all I've found. That's Matt Salmon's mentality is, no, if it's entertaining, it's entertaining.
Absolutely. And I think that it would kill the show, I think, to sort of hold on to this rigid kind of thing. That sometimes I feel that a certain amount of fans get upset when, like, for instance, I wrote a show a couple years ago that dealt with Homer's love for these robots in a pizza parlor, that he remembered from his teenage years. And so it was really fun. That was based on a real thing. That was based on a real person here in the United States, that there were these places called Chuck E. Cheese's. I don't know if they've those in Australia or not.
No, but
they
we
have
know
these
of them.
kind of
Yeah.
robot bands playing, and a lot
Wally
of these
Weasel.
places,
Was it
yeah,
Wally Weasel? Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's one of them. And that they ended up shutting them down, but people became nostalgic for them, and they tried to restore these things. So we said that would be a fun story for Homer to do. So we concocted like a backstory that when he was in high school, he worked at one of these places. So we wrote that show. It aired, I guess, in 22 or 23, and it was like, all right, well, Homer was whatever, 15 years old then. That's whatever, 20 years ago, 22 years ago. That's 1990. So in that episode, Homer was a teenager in 1990 or 91. So he was a fan of like Digital Underground and all those things. And, and some people got really upset about that, and we even put in a joke that it was fun, that I felt that Matt added a joke where we saw one of the kids at the pizza parlor that Homer was working at was wearing a Bart Simpson t-shirt. So, it's fun to me that like the show is always taking place now in the present. So Bart, our current version of Bart, is 10 years old, and he was born in 2012 or 2013, 2014. So he's a kid, a 10-year-old kid now, and Homer is a 40-year-old man now. So that is fun to me. And
Do you sometimes write jokes and go, oh, this'll piss him off, but you do it anyway?
Hardly ever. But I will say there is one particular joke in this premiere that I can't tell you about.
Yeah.
That if you talk to me, in September after that aired, I'll tell you what that was. But there is one that we put in there that to me was like, oh, we got to have this in there because it'll make these people go crazy.
Well, sometimes you got to rile them up just to get some sort of people talking about the show, right?
Yeah, a little bit. But I don't think we don't do that otherwise. We don't do that on purpose. Like, oh, this will really screw them over.
All the Simpsons fans are SOBs.
No, it's great. It's amazing. I mean, sometimes we'll go online. I'll go online and see. It's incredible. I mean, it's amazing to me that it's still, even though like a lot of the references are still to older episodes, but it's still great to see that the show is still part of a national conversation about things. And like when big things happen in the news, like people find Simpsons memes to use it to comment on, or or like this whole thing about how we predict things, which we really don't. But
are you guys just so sick of that now?
Yeah, it's a little crazy. I mean, what's made it even crazier is that, I mean, there's certain things that the show did do that did happen. That's fine, and like, but there's no one here that has any kind of, psychic power or whatever. No. Some things just seem to happen. Yeah. Like for instance, the fact that Dan Graney wrote that episode 20 plus years ago, 23 years ago, predicting like Lisa would be a president and would inherit the budget crisis from President Trump. So
when that happened, did you go, "Oh shit"?
Well, yeah, in a way it was because, but also like if you go back to that time, around that time, Donald Trump, at least here in the United States, was famous already, and he was already talking about like forming a third party and running for president then. So the fact that he would have run for president wasn't that big of a deal, and to say like 20 years in the future he was president was a joke, but then like the joke became real because like someone says this, I didn't say this, but like the show writes stupid things and then America got stupid. So
you planted it in there subconsciously in their minds, and then 20 years later it comes.
I guess so. I mean, then there's other things that are just weird and like looking for stuff. that isn't real. I mean, that we would never have predicted. And then the third thing is that they've now taken over and creating things that never happened. And like, let's say a thing will happen in the news, and then someone will doctor up an image, seemingly saying like the Simpsons did this, but we never did. So that just muddies the waters. It makes
Yeah.
it even more crazy. But I wish we could really predict things, but we don't. Like the one thing that was the show I wrote that just sort of happened that way was the one where Homer became the referee at the World Cup in Rio,
Mm.
and we wrote that a year or two before the World Cup, and we had to have a final game, and we said, oh, Brazil should play Germany in the final thing, and that is what happened. But
Yeah.
I mean, those were big. Brazil and Germany are major soccer, football powerhouses, so it happened that way.
Yeah.
But
Of course, it was going to happen eventually.
yeah. But that's how it goes.
But speaking with the newer episodes, right? Because you're always going to get those people that say it's not as good as it used to be, right? But my son is now just turned 6, and I've got an almost 4-year-old daughter. And when I put The Simpsons on, they want to watch the new episodes, right? Because I just think it's more visually pleasing. It's brighter, it's more colourful, there's more happening. And I just think the jokes are more written for kids of today's generation. And that's the moment for me when I realised, you know what? Even though I may not necessarily enjoy The Simpsons as much as I did when I was a kid, it might not necessarily be for me anymore. These are for today's generation.
I could see that. I mean, we're writing it for now. Like we're
Yeah.
existing in the present day, writing it for
Yeah.
what the present day audience now.
Yeah. Because I have the nostalgic connection with those early episodes as well, which
course.
obviously helps. But now I watch it and I go, you know what? Maybe I just need to just embrace it and say, this is now for today's kids who are now going to have nostalgic connection with the show in 20 years' time.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I can use an analogy of that, which is that because I mean, naturally, I'm part of the show, so I mean, I remember watching the show, early episodes of the show before I was a part of it, and I still go back and watch those, and I still enjoy them. I'm immensely proud of all the shows I've worked on, starting with when I started with the show in season 13. So it's hard for me to say like whatever, but like I have an experience as a fan of a different franchise, which is Star Wars, which is
I was going to say the same thing, Star Wars. Yep.
yeah. So I mean, I'm old enough to remember Star Wars when it first came out in 1977, and just like loving it and being so thrilled by it. And then The Empire Strikes Back, and I couldn't believe that was like the greatest movie I've ever seen. And Return of the Jedi was pretty good. It had some stuff at the end of it that I wasn't so crazy about, but it was still like I still love those, and I have huge memories of those. And then the prequels came out in like 1999 and 2002, and I was not a huge fan of those, and I was disappointed by those. And if you've seen any other things I've done some stuff with Lego and Star Wars and some of my other.
I was going to touch on that just before we finish up.
Yeah. I did some jokes in those about how boring some parts of the prequels are, but then I was surprised. I guess you could say I was surprised to see that like people who were kids in 1999, let's say if you were a 10-year-old or so, or 11 or 12-year-old in 1999, that's the Star Wars that you watched growing up with. And there's a huge amount of devotion and love for those prequels by people who were 10 or 11 years old when those movies came out. And to them, in fact, it's interesting because in recent years, I had the chance to go back and see, a friend of a friend had a print of the original Star Wars movie, which we still call like Star Wars, we don't call it Episode 4.
Yeah.
But anyway, we all went to see it at a movie theater, and it was really really fun.
The untouched version, or
it was a print from like an original print from like 1980 or something maybe, but it was before the special edition and all that stuff. And we watched it. It was great. It was fun, but the first like 40 minutes of that movie are incredibly slow.
Oh, I put it on for my son thinking, I'm going to show him Star Wars now. He's going to love it. And I got I'm like half an hour and I'm like, oh my God, does anything happen here?
Right. But that's by modern standards or by contemporary standards, it's incredibly slow moving, and it doesn't really get started. It really doesn't really get started until after the
end.
Whole thing. Well, I'd say until the stuff with Han Solo
Trash compactor
in the cantina. No, once they kind of blast off,
yeah.
when they're blasting away from from Mos Eisley and everything, and
Yeah.
then and then they get to the Death Star and they rescue Princess Leia. But the beginning of it is very slow moving. But I remember at the time seeing it as a teenager in 1977, not thinking that at all, thinking like this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. This is absolutely incredible. So
Yeah.
everyone has like a different floating relationship to things. So I think in a way, bring back the Simpsons, like everyone has a memory of seeing the early episodes, and they'll always be there. And so, but you're older now, and your life is different, you know. So when these new episodes come around, you have a different relationship to them, and everyone that gets to experience it their own way. So like you're saying, like your children, they're watching the newer episodes, and maybe they, if you watch the season one episodes now, you go back through them, you might say like, oh, this is kind of slow moving, or it's whatever. It's just everyone has a relationship to things that the
Yeah.
things don't change, the shows don't change, but your relationship to them changes and your view on them changes over
Well,
time.
just becoming a dad and just being married, I watched those shows from when I was a kid and through a whole new lens now.
Right.
I
Sure.
enjoy the jokes that I never enjoyed as a kid, and the jokes that I enjoyed as a kid, I'm just like, yeah, whatever. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Do you think the pacing of the writing has changed over the years?
You mean the actual shows, the pacing of the
Yeah.
shows? Yeah, I
Yeah.
think they have. I can think. Well, they have partly for out of necessity too, which is that over the course of these past 30 or so years, the business model of Fox has changed so that they put more commercials in there. So I believe like the early seasons episodes were maybe like let's say 22 minutes long, let's say. Now we're about 20 minutes and 30 seconds. So
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
because there's more commercials squeezed in. That's largely the reason why you don't see as many like couch gags and full credits of all this Bart
It's
skateboarding and the
just
couch
straight.
gag
It's just
because
straight to the show.
it takes up
Yeah.
too much time, So, and we also have to get a little more into the story as quickly as possible. I'm a huge fan. I was talking to one of the writers last week about this, of the kind of older way of storytelling in the show, which was that like often the first act would be just we call it like a first act set piece. It would be,
Yeah.
they go to the swap meet, and you have all these jokes and da da da, and then by the end of that, suddenly it turns out that's what the show is about. Like
Yeah.
the one with George Bush moving in next door, I
Mm.
believe started that way with like that's where Disco Stew I think first shows up, but it's
Yeah.
like it's swap meet whatever because the neighbors are moving blah 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 blah. Who are the new neighbors? Oh my God, it's former President George Bush, and that's the end. That's the first act break. Um, there isn't as much time for that anymore. So often we'll find ourselves like not having as much of that kind of style of storytelling because we have to get there's a limited amount of time now. Because of the shows being shorter. So we'll get into the main story a lot quicker than we used to. And the scenes are shorter and quicker because again we still want to tell our story. We want it to be funny, but there might not be as much time for these kind of extended longer digression kind of things that we used to do.
Do you think the show would not improve, but sort of benefit from being a streaming show where you wouldn't have to worry about commercial breaks anymore? Or do you think that The Simpsons being on Fox, on television, is an important aspect of the show that should remain?
I feel that it's an important aspect of the show, and that even if the show became a streaming show, I would imagine that they would still write it the same way. Like it would still have the same act break structure.
Okay.
But
Do you think they give you the 22 though instead of the 20/30? Do you think they give you
I,
that extra 90 seconds? Doesn't seem like a lot, but it is a lot when you're writing a
well,
show.
sometimes it has to do with not just the time but the budget
Yep.
because every few seconds of animation costs this much money, too. So, like on Efforts for Family, the show I had on for Netflix, there was no time constraint, and we couldn't be any longer than 25 minutes, I believe, and they didn't want us any shorter than like 22 or 20 or 21 minutes. So some episodes were longer than others. Um, and that was an interesting whole different experience of working on a whole different kind of show because that show had no commercial break, so there was no act structure, conventional act structure, and it was a whole different. It was fun because I was still working at The Simpsons, but I would just sort of take time off to work on the other show. So I was sort
Yeah.
of
How'd you find that balance? Because they're two completely different styles of shows.
Yeah, it was fun. It was great. It was a really interesting thing, and I was so happy that the people who are my bosses here, like Jim Brooks and Al Jean and Matt Zellman, um, they allowed me to take time off. You know, whenever we do a new season of F is for Family, I would essentially take like 5 months off or 6 months off,
Wow.
like a sabbatical, as it were, and just go and do the writers' room for F is for Family. And then when the show got put into production, there was all this animation going on. I would then come back to The Simpsons and spend a year at The Simpsons because every season of F is for Family, we would make one like once every year and a half or so. So uh, but I would still be involved with Simpsons in some small way when I was away. But for the most part, I was just like, okay, now I'm an Extra Family head. Now I get to be back in the Simpsons head, and it was really fun and exciting, and to do a whole different kind of show. And it was a show that was I employed a lot of the same kind of humor and comedy and like sign jokes and things that we do on The Simpsons
Mm.
and style of humor, but at the same time it was different in that this was an ongoing like serialized story, and we did season arcs and things like that. And it was a
73
whole.
to 74, wasn't it?
That's right.
73?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, 73 to 74. But it was all like every episode led into the next, and it was sort of like writing. For me, it was like writing up seasons of like the kind of shows that I really prefer to really watch on television, which are shows like Sopranos or Breaking Bad, Mad Men, which has like season arcs, and the characters remember things that happen.
The Wire is my favorite
Seven episodes.
that
Oh,
does
The
that.
Wire, another great show. So it was really fun to be. It would have been hard to me to have to do like a if Episode Family had been like a Simpsons, but in the '70s. Like it would be like there's no reason to do it. Like there already is a Simpsons. So we were so happy that we were able to sort of find a different kind of show, a different kind of storytelling, different kind of characters, and it was very very exciting and fun to do.
Do you think it just sort of just kept you creatively just engaged because you were able to do this fresh project that wasn't the same thing you've been doing for 20 years?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yes. I mean, as great as it is to be part of the Simpsons, um, when you're there, and until I became sort of somewhat elevated to be this kind of co-runner, when you're a writer on staff of a show like this, it's really fun. You get to write your episodes, and you're there every day. And you're pitching on great things and working with everybody else, but it's not as personal of a stake as like a show. It's your show that you created, you're running, and also that's your episode family was get to work with the amazing Bill Burr on that show,
Mm.
and we
What
were
a
both.
cast.
Yeah, yeah, it was incredible, and we were both pouring in so much of our own lives into it. So much of it was based on Bill's life, and the main character Frank was based largely on, to some degree, on Bill's father and his family situation growing up. But so much of it is based on my family situation growing up, my neighborhood growing up in New Jersey in the '70s, and so it was really fun to be able to sort of put all these so much personal stuff into it that made it great and exciting and different. And that where The Simpsons will put some personal things in, like a story from your life or something like that, but you're still sort of serving this amazing show created by Matt Groening and Sam Simon, and with incredible characters. But
It's The
so
Simpsons. Yeah.
yeah, but it was really fun to get to go every couple of months and just really have a thing where it was my show and I was the showrunner and get to work out my own issues.
Well, what did you learn making F is for Family that you could bring to The Simpsons? Was there anything sort of just from a creative perspective that you could sort of learn from that going, oh, that's different, that works. I can maybe apply it to The Simpsons as well? Or was it just
I
two
don't
completely
think
different
so. I think
entities?
it was two
Yeah.
completely different entities, I'd have to say. It was fun because when I'd be at The Simpsons, waiting for, let's say, a new season of Extra Family to hopefully get picked up, I'd be there saying like, "Oh, I can't wait till I can be." It's never a thing where we'd like argue that much or whatever. But like occasionally you'd write something, and then maybe the showrunner would say, "Ah, we're going to go this way, this direction." So I'd have that kind of feeling of like, well, if I'm the showrunner, I get to say what goes, whatever like that, you know. But so then I'd be over there at Efforts for Family, but where on Efforts for Family, I was sort of like the one man kind of showrunner. Like Bill was amazing, but he was busy with acting, and he would go off and do his comedy.
Mm.
So I was essentially like the showrunner, and so there was a lot of responsibility, which was all very challenging and fun. But it was like approving designs and going to edits and things like that, and also being the one in the room saying like, "Well, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this." So then when that was by end of 6 months of that, I was like, just couldn't wait to get back to The Simpsons, where I would just be one of the guys in the room again, just throwing out some stupid crusty joke, whatever, and like it's not my problem, you know. So it was fun to be able to go back and forth.
Did you struggle being the showrunner at first, telling people what to do?
Yes, I did. I did because I like to think of myself as being a nice person, and so much of when you're show running a writer's room, a comedy writer's room, is you're dealing with 7 or 8 people that are all really funny, all really talented, all have amazing ideas, but only one of them is going to work. So I'd have to be the one saying, "Well, we're going to go there, but not this." So I found myself in the beginning of it having to sort of, maybe I used a lot of time sort of explaining why, well, I think we're going to go this instead, like, because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and it took me a while to. I still was that way, but like I was able to have a little more confidence in myself to say like they'll understand, like it's not the end of the world, like everybody pitches, and it's kind of like I'm a big baseball fan, and they say
Yeah.
like in baseball, um,
It's like
if you
Moneyball.
yeah,
You see
right.
Moneyball? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, yeah. But in
Yeah.
baseball, if you get up 10 times and you make 3 hits, that's 300 average, and that's great. But you're
Yeah.
still going to strike out or make it out 7 times out of 10. So everyone feels that way of like, when we're all working together in a comedy room, everyone's pitching, and the idea is like you'll get a few in, you might not get a few in, but it's all for the greater good. So I ended up being able to sort of not have to be so much every time like explaining away why we're not going for that. I just say, oh no, we're gonna go there, whatever, like that. And it was great. We had a great writing staff on that show, just an absolutely great staff. Um, and so it was fun. It was a really great learning experience for me to learn how to be a showrunner on that show.
Based on the success, just because it was just critically just acclaimed, that show, 5 seasons, do you think Netflix would ever toy with the idea of another Michael Price series?
Well, I would hope so. Who knows? I mean, Netflix, this business has changed a lot, even in the last since the last time we
Yeah.
did, like that last season came out 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
It's changed so much that had a huge boom and then a huge contraction in
Yeah.
animation. And I
Five
always
seasons
felt
is a good effort for a show these days.
everyone says that. Yeah, like everyone says, like you got 5 seasons out of Netflix. That's
Yeah.
that's like 35 seasons on Fox. So that was great. I mean, we felt we could have done more. It wasn't our choice to end it.
Okay.
But so it was such a great experience, and I loved those characters so dearly. And we had some ideas for possible like like a spin-off of taking a character and giving them a spin-off show, or possibly like a sequel show
Hmm.
that Netflix at the time didn't seem to be interested in. Um, but you never know. Like it's amazing to see like everything is being rebooted. Like
Yeah.
they're
Futurama's
doing
just
it.
got a new season just started.
Futurama.
So
They're
yeah.
making a new King of the Hill.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe someday down the road, Netflix or somebody else will decide they want to do a little more with those characters. And I'd be very happy if they did.
Well, it's good for us because we do podcasts on King of the Hill and on Futurama, and it's like, give us more
Oh,
episodes.
very
Yes,
good.
please.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, for your time. It's been much appreciated. Yeah, it's just been lovely just to finally chat. We're trying to do this for months now, it feels like, and we
Yeah.
finally made it happen. And yeah, but yeah, all the best with season 36 and onwards. You said season 37 and onwards. So yeah, congratulations on
Yeah.
that and all the best.
Thank you so much. It's been so fun to talk to you. It's been great. Thank you.